My name is Omar Refutation. Many of you may or may not have played a sport throughout your life. Many of you know what it takes to play a sport. With more than 100 sports worldwide, dance is not one of them. My opponent, Sky, claims that dance meets the requirements to be named a sport based off the criteria specified in the definition of a sport. The definition of a sport is an activity involving physical exertion and skill in which an individual or team competes against another or others. I am here to make the counterclaim that even though dance does meet some criteria of sport, it is missing key characteristics that every sport possesses, which keeps dance from being a sport. I have 3 reasons why dance is not a sport. My first reason is that every sport involves 2 or more teams or individuals challenging against each other. Secondly, the quality that every sport has is an objective grading system, something dance does not have. My third reason why dance shouldn't be considered a sport is because dance is more of a performing art and not a sport. Beginning with my first point that every sport involves 2 or more individuals challenging against each other. Unlike other sports where you compete against a team or individual, in dance you compete against a panel of judges. In dance competitions, teams take their turns performing their dance. Never are the teams performing directly against each other. In dance, there is no challenge coming from an opponent, but the challenge to get a high rating. Because the 2 teams are never directly competing against each other, there are no other variables challenging you besides your teammates, the ground, and maybe yourself. Something that soccer players, football players, and basketball players understand that dancers will never understand is what it feels like to be in a direct competition with another team, or to have another team or someone else's performance affect your own. On to my second point, that a characteristic of every sport is an objective grading system. When athletes play a sport, everyone watching knows who won. That's not the case with dance. Sports are won by a specific event happening, whereas dance is won through the judge's opinion. Conventional sports like basketball and athletics have simple, non-subjective winning criteria: a number of baskets scored, or time to run a race, or distance javelin thrown. Dance competitions are won or lost based on subjective judges' decisions. That's where it moves away from being a sport. Lastly, dance is more of a performing art rather than a sport. The presentation of dance is a performance. Sports are not performed, they are played. In dance, you're on stage doing what is already planned, so you know what is going to happen. Whereas in other sports, the chances are endless and you have no idea what to expect. Dance expresses the physical creativity one may have. Dance is more intellectual and is more about the grace and emotion as opposed to the physical strength demands that other sports meet. Sports have tryouts, not auditions. Sports don't spend time on makeup and hair. Sports teams have fields and arenas, not theaters and studios. These are all reasons why dance is a performing art and not a sport. So in conclusion, dance does have some reasons to be named a sport based off the definition, but I believe that dance is not a sport because it's still missing key components that make up a sport, which are: 1, every sport involves 2 or more individuals challenging against each other; 2, every sport has an objective grading system; and 3, dance is a performing art, not a sport. These are all reasons to believe why dance should not be named a sport. Thank you.
I agree with you.
Oh, I thought it was falling, and I was reaching to grab it before it fell. I didn't even see you standing there. I just out of the corner of my eye, the paper's going. I'm going, okay, good deal. Thank you. Yeah, cat-like reflexes. All right. All right, Omar, there are some things in the presentation that I think are really good. There are some things that are problematic. Let's start with the problematic stuff, get it out of the way. you basically don't direct any of your argument to the claims that the advocate made. So you're kind of conceding that she's got a definition, and by some criteria that she has defined, dance would maybe fit those kinds of things. But you're arguing for a competing criteria. All right, and so, which is fine. You can argue that there is a counter definition that's more appropriate, but now you have to give us a reason why your definition is more valuable. You might be willing to concede, for instance, that dance is athletic, that it is, like you said, it is a performance. But there's a difference between something being a sport and being a athletic performance, for instance. And I think that you need to give us some grounds for believing that there is a difference there. Maybe there's, maybe it's the way it's sanctioned. I mean, you give us a whole bunch of criteria. Is there anybody who uses those criteria other than yourself? That would be, I think, pretty helpful in that situation. For instance, you could look at the NCAA and say, are there any academic institutions that identify dance as a sport, and therefore it's covered by Title IX, and it requires funding in those particular categories, and they offer scholarships for those kinds of things. If there isn't, then that would be one reason that you could maybe say that it fits into a different category and doesn't really fit into the sports category. And you could say, look, lots of things require rehearsal and practice and athletic accomplishment that doesn't necessarily make them a sport. Believe me, the guys and gals who work in the band spend hours practicing. It's exhausting if you're carrying around your instrument. You get up at 5 o'clock every day and you have to do this whole performance kind of thing. And if you're doing designs and all that kind of stuff, why isn't that the same thing? But nobody thinks of referring to the marching band as being a sport. And here is a comparison that kind of fits the definition that she has. So I think what you need to do is you need to attack the grounds and the warrant that the advocate is presenting, and you don't really do much of that. Now, what you do, I think, pretty effectively is argue a counter definition for sport that involves these other criteria that you have. That there has to be not just a competition between two or more people but teams, but that those competitions, for instance, have to affect one another. That the performers on the field or in the play or in the competition have to have an influence on one another. In the soccer field, you have to avoid your opponent. You have to score over their performance of their sport. When you have these other athletic events that are scored in some way, but you're not directly affected, you don't come into contact with, you don't play against, you aren't on the field or the court at the same time as your opponent is, that lacks something, then that's what really defines a sport. And I think, again, you need to have some more defense of that. I think you've got a good explanation of why you see it that way, but I think you need to find some evidence to back that up again. And the same sort of thing might apply. Maybe there are some criteria that you could look for that would fit that to distinguish a sport from something else. Of course, I can imagine what the answer would be from the other side. Well, by that criteria, checkers and cards are a sport because you're directly influenced by the play of the other person, but there's no athletic component to it. And that's when you get into I thought the other argument was, that you have to be influenced by this. This is a rehearsed performance, and your performance is going to be the same regardless of what the other people do, and the scoring is a different kind of thing. Now, again, I think that there are potential arguments on the other side. There are a whole bunch of things that I think people would call sports that are scored that way. Gymnastics, diving, downhill skiing, ice skating, all those kinds of things. You would have to be willing to say that those things are not sports also, because they don't meet the first couple of criteria that you had. And I think you'd have to find some way to defend those arguments. So I like the concepts that you came up with. I just think they need a little bit more development and proof on them, and I think that you need to go after the advocate's arguments a little bit more too. All right, thank you.